Okay, we're live.
Good morning. Let us begin by acknowledging that we are gathered today in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral, present, and future territory of the Mi'kmaq people. Today, we gather with the intent followed by the Living Peace and Friendship Treaty with respect, cooperation, and coexistence. We are all treaty people. I welcome everybody today to the Town Council meeting. It's a special meeting of March 21st, 2025. I call this meeting, which is a pre-budget meeting, to order. I will accept additions to the agenda or a motion to approve. Deputy Mayor?
I will make the motion to approve.
And seconded by Councillor Carver. Thank you very much. All those in favor signify aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The motion is carried. I would also like to turn the meeting over to the CAO for a pre-ramble on what we hope to accomplish today.
Well, thank you, Mayor. So yeah, we've only got an hour for this meeting, and it really is just kind of an initial touch base to set expectations on both sides as far as staff and council for the budget process. So I kind of broke down the structure of it into three areas, and maybe it doesn't capture everything, but wanting to know about the analysis that would be expected to be included in the budget. So because we've had so many points in the strategic plan and an audit committee last night about, other types of information presentation within the budget, it would be great for Ashley and I to have requests and kind of get some insight into if the standard budget presentation needs additional stuff, what might that look like? And also talking about that first is a good way to know if we're going to need more time to get there. So that leads into the second point, which is the process of the budget. So the schedule and timing of meetings, we have some on the calendar, but they don't, specify to the duration and everything, or how we'll structure them between utilities in general. And so every year we talk about that and we try to make tweaks to make it work better for everybody. And then the actual content of the budget, which is picking up from last night's presentation of the assessment role and talking about, what we've got to work with in terms of revenue projections and things like that. And if there's any guidance at a high level, like if Kelly wants to make any comments before heading overseas, that's the category of the content, I guess is what I would say. So if we're comfortable to go through it in that order, then the first thing to talk about is the presentation of the budget, like what is included in terms of analysis and presentation. We have a couple of specific notes in the strategic plan, and I think it's important to acknowledge that some of those will probably take a fair part of your term to accomplish in terms of adding layers of analysis to the budget presentation. So this is more like, what are some of the more immediate things we can accomplish? Before just asking people to jump in, there was one suggestion at last night's meeting for the inclusion of essentially something that shows, and actually you're going to be better with the accounting terminology because Daryl and you were speaking some accounting terminology, but essentially as you, end the year, there are changes in things that are reflected in the financial statements, like the value of our assets that are not really presented in the budget. So something that's like, at the end of the year, here's the impact of this budget in the manner in which it might be described in financial statements, was a suggestion for like a sheet near the beginning of the budget. And I think, I won't speak for you, that is something that can be accomplished relatively easily. Like the information is mostly there already, it's just a matter of presentation.
Yeah, I think he's looking for a little bit more of a balance sheet side of things, and without going into the full balance sheet, because this is all P&L that we provide on the budget. I think that could be something to just a high level analysis of where our assets are. Yep.
So that's just one suggestion as to something that could be added to improve the budget documentation this year.
Yeah.
Does anyone have any other things?
Councillor Pufferman?
If I could expand on that slightly, as I see it as a beginner, if you will. Last night, and you referred to exactly that, but I was thinking more of what I might call a financial precondition indicator. In simple terms, what is the long-term debt? What is the short-term debt? What is the annual debt service cost? Not buried in three different places. Reserves, accounts receivable payable, the net revenue from the solar garden, the net revenue from area, if there is any, and so on. Those are, and tracked over a couple of years at least. Those are key financial condition indicators. And without understanding that to begin with, it's very difficult to get into the intricacies of financial statements, which have categories which contain all sorts of different bits and pieces of information.
Okay. Deputy Mayor.
I just had kind of to follow on from what Brian is saying, something around what is sort of the 5-year outlook look like in terms of our budget decision making, right? So if there's any way that we could, I guess, kind of amplify what Brian is saying, but kind of understand where we sit in terms of financial health or what would the auditor be telling us, for example, right? So what should we pay attention to? What should we be careful about? Just a bigger kind of 30,000 foot perspective as opposed to diving right into like P&L and the details. And what might that 5-year, what we do today impact the longer term?
Yes, Ashley?
I was just wondering, so would it be 5 years on the capital side or on operating or both? Like, how do you see that? Because we do a 10-year plan on capital, so maybe this is more of an operating. Yeah, we do a full 10-year analysis on it. We've only done it for the last couple of years, so we're really beefing up that type of analysis. But is this more maybe on the operating, like if we see that we're gonna require more debt or something in the next couple of years, like something
Yeah.
like that, to just give heads up?
kind of everybody around the
Preview.
table, a
Yeah.
preview of, okay, because we've got a lot in our strategic plan, what does that actually, like, how will that impact the community, I guess, during our term and after our term? Just a wider angle lens, I guess, on the would be great, I think.
So I know we want to
Yeah.
hear from everybody,
Yes.
but so I don't have to keep everything in my head for the first two.
Yeah. Go for
So
it.
I think, a lot of great suggestions. I think Ashley and I are probably trying to categorize them into things that could be accomplished in year one versus things that may not be able to be accomplished in year one. Like, I am concerned about the future projection for operating things. I
Yeah.
think the council will need to have a little bit more insight into how that will come off to the public. Because you haven't made those decisions yet.
Right. Yeah,
And
yeah.
it can be very hard to chart that in a way that doesn't create possibly false expectations with people. So we just may not want to jump right into having it out there without saying like, okay, here's some models as to how it could look. Let's make sure we're all good before this becomes a public facing presentation. Because financial projections often lead to mistaken impressions. And I know if Councillor Feeney was here, he would probably be making the same point.
Sure, yeah.
He really appreciates them, but he's also been one to say, if you don't know exactly what you're looking for, if you don't understand the nature of it as a projection, it could create a lot of mistaken impressions for people.
Sure.
So I think workshopping that, we might want to
Yeah.
workshop that point.
And really, my point is just making sure that around the table, we're making conscious decisions about, healthy decisions about the future, that's all.
Well, we do try to project things out, like Ashley was saying about, like, if you know that the 10-year capital program is going in a certain direction, you're going to need to start putting money aside, or, that's
Right,
what's led to
right.
decisions like increasing the infrastructure charge with the stormwater section last year.
Right.
Those type of decisions, the increase to the annual equipment reserve transfer, which may not be a thing that people noticed if you were on council, but those are things that came from looking at the 10-year projection for capital. So we definitely do get that dimension now.
Okay.
But yeah, I think it's just a work in progress is all I'm
Okay.
saying.
Sure.
I think looking back in the past for certain things is relatively straightforward. Like, obviously, we're dealing with some unaudited information for the last year, and at this point, the last 2 years. But we can certainly look at what we're claiming to be budget actuals going back a couple of years. I think trends are worth considering, so like maybe we can include in the assessment section just a little year over year for the last few years, like where the assessment has gone, like what part came from construction, what
Yeah.
part applied from commercial and
Yeah, I was
residential.
thinking of that last
Because you
night.
presented
Yeah.
it every year, so you should be able to
Do
pull
the
it and make a
comparable
5-year
between-
comparison.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
That's
yet
good,
last night
yeah.
we were speaking kind of about future-proofing things, right? So it's just
Yeah.
getting a better idea of, you know,
Councillor Popelman?
we want this and that'll have that impact.
Sorry, the reason is I brought up that list of questions and fact sheets, if you will,
Mhm.
is because there's a huge area of confusion running into the last election, the numbers flying around all over the place. We need to establish a base and confidence in where we're at.
Mhm.
That's what it's about.
Mhm. Mhm. I think we got that feeling last night,
Hmm.
quite clearly. Um,
And I think just some more detailed notes to speak to some of the points you made about like the solar garden and stuff. Like we could just try to put a little bit more in the notes, I think, as we go through, consider somebody may not have looked elsewhere for information. We could even put in the notes where on the website that
We're gonna
information
call them
is.
penny notes.
That would be great. Actually, links like that would be great, just for the public. to-
And a lot of that is the final like the final version, like we usually provide different notes to council with each draft version. And gradually pare them down and replace them with things that are aimed at public education at the end. So that may be more of like, at the end, we go through and make sure the notes that aren't for you guys, because you know mostly, you know, the notes we give you are things you wouldn't already know. And then at the end, the final version that goes out would have notes for people who aren't in the loop.
Yeah, that's not all.
That's usually what we've
Yeah.
done, it's just adding a little bit more to that.
Yeah,
Yeah, a little bit meat on the bone.
We could also workshop the outgoing notes with the communications committee.
Councillor Popelman?
yeah.
Notes are great as far as that goes. They're helpful, but you're not going to get a lot of people in town spending a lot of time looking through financials to check notes to see what's referred to another page and then to refer to another page. I'm talking about clear numbers,
Mhm.
printed, not referred to through a complex series of looking at town financials.
Okay, Councillor Wilson.
It's sort of apropos Brian's comments, but I'm wondering with the solar garden, we know, I guess at this point, that we don't really know the structure of that organization, like who owns it and who does what. Are we, I guess this is more of a suggestion than a question, but could we treat the solar garden as a standalone business for the purposes of accounting for it for this year, just so we're clear who, how it looks financially, and then when we figure out who owns it, we can just move that into that balance sheet, wherever it is.
Do you think that's possible?
I think that's.
Yeah, it's
possible.
probably, you know, the good way, Chris Kelly says, because we don't know and won't know until mid-year where it's gonna end up,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Mm.
Yeah, good idea.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just, what can-
Yes, sure.
I just wanted to go ask, Brian, when you said sort of, I'm just trying to get a concept idea of what you're looking for. So when we present the budget, there's sort of a 1 or 2 page, verbiage about what has happened in the year, where the tax rates are going. And then there's kind of a lead sheet, which basically shows a summary of what the 150 page document shows. So it says, you know, here's our revenue from the town, here's our revenue from here, da, da, da.
Mhm.
So I'm trying to figure out from that, how we can make it even more concise, like what are you looking for in regards to sort of, you're almost looking for like a snapshot of here's what everything is, but I can't, I'm not quite following how to get there.
It seems odd to me that, go ahead.
No, is it, Brian, the financial indicators on, the house with the financial indicators on sort of general strength of the business? Is that
No,
what you're
no,
thinking?
no,
No?
no.
Okay.
He wants actual numbers.
But for example, the outstanding debt of the town was a discussion item during the last election. And numbers ran up to $40 million and then it's averaged down to per resident. And these and then last night, we're in wonderful condition and we only own 1.6%, not GDP, but whatever it is. So it's actual crunch numbers. I mean, there is an actual debt of the town,
Yeah.
that number.
So the debt one is actually not that difficult at all to deal with, so that would go under the schedule of funds statement, which is something we already have. It's already showing all the change in financial position with respect to reserves and year end and all that kind of stuff. All we just need to do is add a line that says how the debt has changed. And I think
Yeah,
you'd also add
absolutely.
the balance sheet. So I mean, we can add some more emphasis on the debt.
But there is,
Yeah.
excuse me, there is a line, there is a page in the budget, I think, that shows exactly what our debt is. And what the changes are.
I actually think that may have dropped off over the years. Now that we're talking
Well, I
about
remember
it.
that last year there was one that said our total debt was 9 million. 4 million of which was the fire, or 5, whichever. And it, you know, it shook out to be that the real debt of the town was about 1.9
Was it
$9
still working?
million.
paper?
That may have been just like a working paper to support the debt that I would have provided, so, sort
I
of.
don't think it's in the final version that went.
Yeah,
over.
so what we're looking for is more, and this sounds like an evolving thing every time we meet possibly, but sort of taglines, like here's where our debt was, here's where it is now. Here's where it was 2 years ago, like
Yes.
just sort of a trend analysis of where our
Yes.
debt is on short term, long term, and then
Yes.
other areas as well, and we can come about those as we have these meetings, and I can add them too. So just sort of a summary page of facts.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
That is the point. And more particularly, the debt service number, rather than being buried in the fire departments and other places, shall we say, bears an enormous impact upon the candidate going forward. Debt service we can afford, which then takes away from the operating revenue that we're left with. So it's an important number. And some of the other ones I mentioned too. So.
Yeah, okay, so I can actually create a debt summary that breaks it out, short term, long term, what interest we're paying per debt. Like, do you want like a full, like, here's our five sources of
Yeah.
debt, here's what we pay on an annual basis,
I
or
mean,
do we?
that really
that
is what the
you?
working paper includes. I think we need to work on what the public
Just
would
a
get. 'Cause
total,
at a certain point, you're not getting the clarity Brian's looking for because there's too much
Yes, you're
information.
Okay.
kind of crunching it
Yeah.
out.
okay, well, I'll bring something and then we can kind
So,
of
yeah,
tweak
I
it,
think,
as-
like, the
which is the
town-
whole
the-
budget process
the-
anyway,
yeah.
so.
Well, the
I
debt
did
belongs.
send you that list.
That, okay,
Yes, that
perfect,
was-
thank you,
The
Brian.
debt belongs to town general, fire, water, and electric. And we can point out what the debt of each of them is and how those debts are serviced. And I think that would go a long way.
Yeah.
It's just that, just even, you know, for
Points
the
the
4
direction.
different types of debt and how are they paid for, which each one is different.
Mhm.
Yeah, well, let's have a go and see where it gets to.
Yeah. Okay, sounds good,
Yeah,
thank you.
thank you.
They're smiling.
Oh, we're sitting quietly on this side of the table.
Anybody else have a point that they'd like to make now? Oh, Councillor Carver.
Yeah, well, I'm picking up on what Councillor Palferman and the mayor has said, the importance of having material that is really understandable by the council and by the public. It's really, really important. I'm a big person for graphics. If things can be expressed as graphics, that's great. And I think that helps. And I'm glad you mentioned the idea of referring the budget back to, or to the communications committee. Just to, and we'll have a communications person on board too at that point, I hope. So that we can talk about how to convey the information to the public. So it's, for me, the impact on the citizens and the uptake from the citizens is really important for all of the same reasons that have already been said. And also that we do whatever we can in the budget to address affordability concerns to the best of our ability that we can as a municipality. I mean, there's only so much we can do. But to keep that in mind because it is such a serious issue. And another thing is if there's a way to include a comparison with other municipalities, either the other 4 municipalities in Lunenburg County of our tax rates, for example, our electricity rates. I don't know how much of that is possible, but that kind of comparison, I think, might be useful to citizens.
So we do have something in the beginning of the budget, sort of, kind of goes on my Excel sheet, it's under the assessment section, but it does compare the tax rate and, it kind of breaks it down.
Yeah, it's the whole, like, if you take the full cost of living from utilities, taxes, et cetera, how does it compare between the three different towns?
So.
Right, and on the same value of house, property. I think that's where things get a little bit skewed in terms of taxes.
Well, what we have like an average house value for the
Yeah.
experiment.
So this breaks it down, property tax, if there's fire tax, sewer, water infrastructure, so anything that's available for Bridgewater, Lunenburg, and Mahone Bay are the three that we do a comparison against. There's a lot of gaps in that data because it just depends on what's
Yeah.
available on their
Well, the
website.
big gap that's coming out from that comment about house value though is by picking a house value, what we're showing is, you know, at that value, it's more affordable to live in Mahone Bay. If you
Yeah.
have a house that is much more valuable, it's actually relatively speaking, much more cost effective to live in Mahone Bay.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
So maybe we should actually have like two price
Absolutely.
points
Yeah,
or maybe 3 price points for the house, cause
Yeah.
it's just another column, it's easy
Yeah.
for you to change.
Mhm.
I'm just thinking, cause the fixed utility rates are higher here, but
Yeah.
the taxes are lower
Yeah.
here. So in comparison, the more valuable your home is, the less you're paying relative to the other places.
Okay, Councillor Pufferman?
I'm assuming, thank you, I'm assuming that this is already in there, but under the affordability funds, where we have a certain amount of revenue and then we have the non-negotiables, what we have to pay out for whatever the cause is. And then we have the debt service. So what we're left with is what we have to work with. And if that's explained, the residual, it would be helpful.
Right,
Yeah, and it's sort of a representation, because this is what the last sheet before the capital budget has always sort
Yeah.
of tried to serve for. So it basically shows like funding dedicated capital, less payments on capital debt equals money for capital revenue this year, or revenue or reserve contribution for capital next
I
year.
thought it might be there, but it's
Yeah, maybe
pretty
just try
important
to
to step
keep it
down,
up a little bit.
again, simplified.
Deputy Mayor?
Yes, thank you. I'm probably saying the same thing as Brian, but it would be great, maybe, and maybe this is for the communications committee, to have the impact on affordability of what we're doing. So maybe it's not exactly part of the budget process, but if we can keep in mind that we want to take that information and relay it to the public in terms of affordability impact, positive or negative, whatever that may be. I think what we're all trying to say here is that we want almost an easy town resident lens to what we're doing.
Yeah.
So if we could have that in the back of our minds, that at the end of this process or throughout the process, we want to be able to transmit information for the public that's easily digestible, whether it's infographics or whether it's basic data and comparisons. Sounds like that's what we're doing right now, is this, it's more of a resident-focused approach to the, not the budget process, but how we communicate that and get it out there.
Yeah. It's,
Yeah, that last point about cost impact of the budget on the average household can be included at some point. I'm not sure if we'll get to it in year one. I'm just wanting to make sure that we don't create, again, like a totally negative expectation. If all you can break out is, this is what this budget will cost you, it's not necessarily gonna frame it in terms of the value of that. So again, we might just need more time than we'll have this year, but we can work on it. I just wanna say, like,
It's
I think that's an excellent nuance
A
point.
living
It's just a
document.
It's
little bit
more of a living
complex, yeah.
document and
Yeah.
nuanced to the public, as opposed to an accountant. That's,
well,
That's it.
and I think that's the point, is that, you know, this budget is very much accountant type,
Yes.
and it's
Yeah.
very intimidating if you're not me.
But it's funny to
And-
say that because it's come so far, I mean, the old council.
It has.
Thing from like the incredibly accountant speed version of the budget. we
Yeah,
used to
and
use.
it's a moving piece always. So I think probably having more summaries and more graphics and that type of thing at the front to really give snapshot views of what the nitty gritty is. Cause really, at the end of the day, the residents are probably not looking at the GL detail and the nitty-gritty of each account because they're overwhelmed, and it's a big document, so.
What's a GLD?
Yeah, right, exactly, so, I take that and I agree that, more summaries and more just specific impacts would probably go a long way with the residents, and so, yeah.
Counselor
Yeah,
Toronto?
so to Colin, Brian's point, I pretty much said what I was gonna say. But I wonder if it would be good to have, I mean, we still put something out for the public and have it relatable, like, when we get our, utility bills, and we kind of, they know how to read those things and they have all the things, this is what you use, this is the rates and all that stuff. But maybe even we could do, maybe the communications committee could do a little YouTube. Hey, this is what we're,
Well, when I was campaigning, there were people who did not know how to read the utility bills.
no, and you know
Right,
what?
and that's very common, so
Yeah.
having a YouTube or a workshop
Yes.
someday, at the fire hall with people that they can understand what the add-ons are for and different, things that are on their utility bills. That's all part of improved communications.
yeah.
right?
I like that, and I
And
think,
some people just open up their bill and really just see what the bottom line is, and
Stuff
pay
it in
it.
a drawer.
They don't really, or, compare from month to month, my husband does, but, I don't. Cause I look, I depend on him to do that too, but I did hear from people who just really don't understand their tax bill, their utility bills. And maybe that's something that, not right now, but after the budget, these are things that we can do to help better communicate our spending and what it means to them and whatnot.
Yeah, we've always had a post-budget approval newsletter.
Yeah,
And so
very
we try to
simplified.
make that something
Yeah.
that is
Yeah.
easier for the public. And I guess it's just looking at that process, like what are we doing to communicate the budget, and then looking at other opportunities, which the communications position and the committee can help.
mhm,
I think the YouTube video is a great idea because I think some people may not feel comfortable asking the questions, whereas if there's a link and it's a 5-minute, 3-minute video of here's what your bill means, or, a 10-minute video of here's a snapshot of what the budget is entailed, and I think that would give more access to people that maybe don't want to give me a call and talk numbers.
The trouble with the link is that not everybody is
yeah.
connected. So that's just saying,
Ample.
if there was something in the actual bill. Anyway,
The clerk had
Just for council reference on the website under finance, there is images of each bill and a breakdown of what everything is. And it's just online, it can be printed if somebody asks questions about it. It explains what all the numbers are.
Counselor Palferman and then Carver.
Again, this may well be implicit in what's being discussed, but if an actual short list of projects accomplished in the past year and planned for the ensuing year, literally, these pipes are being dug up because, trails part of the Edgewater project, but the underneath is
Mhm.
the big part of it. Those type of messages explain why the money is being spent and on what and so on.
Right,
That's all.
yeah. Okay, Counselor Carver.
some municipalities have citizen participation procedures in the preparation of the budget. And I think there's different ways of doing it, but I don't know if we have really talked about that as a possibility. So it's both, could be both a method of having input into the budget, what's important to our citizens, and also could be a bit of an education process as well. I don't have anything more to offer on that
Well,
topic.
it
other
may
than
be
the idea.
something that, where you and I took that engagement training. It's something we could plan for in the next 4 years, how we would go about adding that as a pre-budget event, for, so, I'd like to see something like that because, what I understand with modal, there were people who would never come out to a meeting who actually were recommending to people to go to these
Yeah,
meetings,
yeah.
so, because they could understand
Right.
themselves.
Yeah.
And politicians were removed from the process. Staffers were the people that they were talking to at tables. Counselors were there, but they had a name tag with, I do not speak at this meeting, because it's about listening to it's the public's time to contribute,
Right.
right? So you maybe socialized and you wandered around as a counselor.
Mm.
But the voices at the table were staff interacting with the public. It's kind of interesting,
So
wasn't
the idea that is it's too late to build anything really serious at this, for this budget, but we can plan
Yeah.
ahead for
it?
the
Exactly.
next budget, next
Mhm.
year,
Yeah.
next year, yeah.
Yeah, I really think that's the best way to look
Yeah,
at it. I
yeah.
mean, you don't want to do it and have it seen as not genuine.
Right.
And we have been doing engagement around the strat plan development, which leads into this year's
Yeah,
budget, so
yeah,
that's
yeah.
kind of filling that.
So
Mhm.
we expound on that concept.
And we do it in
Yeah.
the time period we've been doing strat plan, so we wouldn't wait till April.
Right.
So it'd be like January through April, so it's something we have to figure
Mm-hmm.
out between now and then.
Mhm.
So can I
Sure,
I just-
you're
mostly I wanna
now
move-
on the,
wanna
you're
move
now,
this along,
it's
because I
your
think we've
turn.
had a tremendous amount of feedback on what I had described, the analysis of the budget, like what are the documents? I would say there's enough in there that we can justify what I'm about to say, which is, I'm suggesting that we not start the budget with the first scheduled budget meeting, but rather the second. We drop the first scheduled budget meeting.
Okay.
So those are the dates that were, presentation of the budget initially for the, 4th of April.
Mhm.
And then the first discussion meeting was on the 11th, the following Friday, so I'm suggesting that we present on the 11th.
So take out the fourth.
And take out the 4th, and the reason I was going to suggest that prior to this conversation, which also makes me think that Ashley could use a little bit of extra lead time, certainly. But the other reason was, we have a number of items that are coming to the next two council meetings that are then budget referrals or have impacts on the budget, including conversations with Communities in Bloom and the Chamber and Mahone Bay United, I think is coming to present next, so there's a lot of stuff like that. And we would need at least the one council meeting in April to get that stuff past council to know whether there is an inclusion of any of those things in the budget, because it's hard for us to speculate on where council's gonna go with a request that you haven't heard yet. So I think, my suggestion would be that, and Ashley, unless you think that the 11th isn't even giving you enough time.
Okay.
That we not at least start on the 4th.
I think where we're hopefully gonna be starting the audit soon, the 11th would be preferable. I guess we could just provide an update. I wanna be able to give you guys something that you want to look at, but yeah, we'll just, I guess, see right now where everything falls. I don't wanna bring something to the table that doesn't have your request in it and then just waste your time, so I wanna make sure that what I provide is a good starting point for council. So we'll do the 11th, and if something goes extremely awry between now and then, I will let you know, but let's go for the 11th.
Okay, and then the 16th, is that another?
So yeah,
day?
so what would happen if we go with the scheduled meetings is the presentation on the 11th is the first look people get at the document. So like, we like to actually walk you through it. Ashley will come and walk you through the document that day, and then you take it away. And so you'd have from the Friday till the following Wednesday, according to the 16th being the next meeting.
Mhm.
At which point we will get together and talk, well, we haven't talked about times yet. The thought was the Fridays was in the morning.
Yeah, but-
I think that the Wednesday meeting was originally scheduled to be in the evening, and I would have some question that first discussion meeting maybe is better served during the day. I just hadn't quite got to that point, yeah, so that's really the next question, is so if we start on the 11th, 9 AM presentation, about 2 hours or so, we'll be presenting. Then you digest it for as long as you need to, could be the next Wednesday, could be the next Friday, we have Wednesday scheduled. That big discussion that follows typically when everyone has had a chance to digest it, now they wanna ask questions, make suggestions and get into it.
Mhm.
It is probably preferable to do a 9 AM session, at least based on prior years and our conversations about it. So I don't know if having a meeting on the 16th is gonna work well for that for everybody.
Okay.
That's just a question.
Yeah,
And then typically, if we're going to do those, we wanna know, are we capping it at the morning? So that we're not doing a full day on budget. And if so, we're allowed to add a couple more later in the month.
Okay,
So those are kind of the things we need to reset the schedule a little bit.
okay. It's just
So
like
let's
our
repeat that one
calendar's
then.
still up, right? So,
Yeah, they certainly do.
and then we have a couple of people out of town who probably
So
will
is there,
join
any-
us remotely.
sorry. Is there any mileage in putting a hold on the 25th in the morning too, on the Friday, or the 25th?
Yeah, I think we'll definitely want to use the 25th, and I guess, I think from the 11th to the 25th is too long
Mm-hmm,
to wait.
but it include the 16th, is that?
Yeah, well,
11,
it
16.
was gonna
What
be.
about 11, 18, 25, Friday mornings?
18 is Good Friday.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oops.
It wouldn't be good then.
Fine by me.
Yeah, fine by me too.
You're not even here.
I'll be in church. I'll be
Sorry,
in church.
sorry,
But it's a Good Friday.
to do a budget?
Bum, bum.
Well, you never launch a vote on
No,
Fridays,
no, no.
ever on a Friday.
So 11, 9
Say
AM,
out.
16th, 9 AM, and 18, 9 AM, is that what we need to
You
put in?
know,
our-
we have the 16th at 9 scheduled. I don't know if there's a big difference for people, but the 15th would work a lot better for me.
In the
But,
morning?
Yeah, if we're going for daytime, because I had the 15th, I had the 16th at night. So I actually have a bunch of commitments on the 16th that I didn't really realize were gonna get in the way if we.
15th in the morning, great.
So that gives you the weekend to digest the document and come back and have a conversation. You don't wanna wait too long, you want a little bit of time, you do wanna be fairly fresh. If we wait 2 weeks, you'll have to start over again.
Mhm.
So the 15th at 9 works?
So you're gonna send this out?
Yeah, we'll send out a series of invitations down there, that's why we're getting it down. You didn't have it in your calendar before, because we didn't.
And hold the 25th too?
And then, yeah, I guess so, we'd have like Easter break, we have a big discussion on the 15th at 9 AM. And then Ashley would have time to take that away and make changes, and then we'd be coming back to the 25th, which means that, a couple of days ahead of that, we could probably get out a revised draft. I think that seems reasonable,
Yeah.
looking over at you just to make sure, but.
Yeah, yeah,
I think
yeah.
that seems reasonable. So we'd have, and then the question would be, with that giving us 3 hours of discussion on the 15th and 3 hours of discussion on the 25th,
Mhm.
unless we want to go longer than 3 hours,
Mhm.
I think that we're still going to need at least one more scheduled, and we could always say it's just one more and then overflow. So if we were gonna schedule one more the following week, the week of the 28th of April, it would,
Oh, it would have to be a Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday morning, because that is at M. It is that Wednesday.
well, that was actually I didn't realize that, but that was actually gonna be my suggestion anyway, because we wanna get it to a council meeting, we wanna take
Okay.
the resulting, so the sooner it gets done, the more time Ashley has to prepare a version for final approval.
Mhm.
If presuming we don't need more overflow meetings, in which case we'll deal with that, but, so how are the 28th and the 29th, Monday and Tuesday?
If we have a meeting on the 25th, it's gonna be hard to turn everything around.
I don't think we
by-
would expect a big revision there, I
At this
think,
point,
I think
since
what
the
we would
third
expect
meeting.
is to focus on, like, we've made revisions now. Let's maybe split the 25th and 28th into general and utilities or
Okay,
something.
yep.
That's just my thought, we can figure out how the conversation goes as we go, but. So maybe we should say the 29th, Tuesday, just for the sake of, we do Tuesdays and Fridays.
Okay.
So that would have us on the 15th, sorry, Penny.
Did you say Tuesday, the 29th?
Yeah, that'd be my suggestion, so that we'd have the 15th, we'd have the 25th, and the 29th.
And for what it's worth, the communications committee meets on the 17th. Sort of midstream of all of those things, if that helps any.
Yeah,
Mhm.
Yeah, that would probably be convenient.
Kelly, do you sit on the communications committee?
Currently,
Yeah, okay. So you'll be updated anyway from these meetings, right? So where you do the newsletter work, that's good too. I just want to make sure you're in the loop with all that, okay.
the 29th, the daytime again, or?
Yeah, that was still gonna be
Nine.
9 to noon. Yeah, and I mean, budget, like, that's 10 hours, we've often gone 10 to 15 in total, so.
Yeah, I think last year we sort of broke down the budget, didn't we, and did part of it one day. and then-
Yeah, and then
Part
utilities
another
kind
bit.
of,
Yeah,
yeah, I think that's, because they're kind of their own entity
Yes,
anyways, it's a
yes.
nice way to focus.
and are we
on-
doing the grant, when are we doing the grant allocations?
Well, I think normally how it's gone historically is council's requested Dylan, I give Dylan the list of all grants
Well,
and.
yeah, we're
he's
gonna have them
proposed
in
a-
before the budget is presented, we're gonna have time, I think, just show the proposed, right, the first
Yeah.
draft. And then
And then it's
council will
up to
decide
council
from there
to-
what you wanna do with that, but.
Okay.
So yeah, the first draft you'll receive will include a recommended grant award based on prior precedents, unless you want to do something different. I'm not super comfortable with it, but it is what we've been doing.
Yeah.
It just sort of suggests that those are like now something you have to debate moving away from, like what I've put in as a recommended award.
Okay,
And so it's kind of like set a expectation, but that is what prior councils did decide we wanted to do. So everything else in the budget includes staff recommendations, so I suppose it is the same logic for staff to recommend on the grants, but.
The other option is that I just put all the grants in and then council decides.
Yes, and that's
the
been found to be,
allocation.
just takes an entire 3 hour.
It takes a long
yeah,
time.
yeah, well, that's why I asked,
Yeah.
because it can be a very long, because people, you
I
know.
mean, I think maybe
Yeah.
like we do have grants to organizations policy on our list of policies to look at and. You know, maybe we could say, let's look at that between this budget and next to come up with a better way that maybe suits everyone better. And I don't mind in the meantime, we just do what we've done, cause I do think it could be a very lengthy. It's like a new group of people and it already takes 3 hours.
Council?
Thank you. In terms of timing for grants, will we have a chance to look at the staff report on alternatives to belonging and sidewalks and things like that, that Councilor Carver had mentioned? Will we have time to make sure that's included in that process, or?
I'm not quite sure how the timing of that's gonna fall. I'll do my best. There's been a lot of different things that have been raised that have to get captured into that report.
Yeah.
I imagine that one could get to the April 8th meeting, which is part of the benefit of giving us that meeting before the
Okay.
budget.
Great.
So I'll make a note for that, yeah.
Great, okay, thanks.
Any other suggestions here while we're? Okay.
Sorry,
Ashley.
just in regards to the grants real quick, some of the applications are fairly lengthy and I know some councilors like to review them prior to the meeting, which is certainly preferable because it's a read. So if anybody would like those, they can be printed off, some of them are huge, they can be zipped and mailed off to you all or put on a OneDrive type thing, so. Perhaps we could just make a point to read those beforehand if possible, just so that when we get to
Yeah.
when we get
Even
to
if there's a
the.
list of recommended awards, it still helps if everybody's read what the requests were.
Yeah, just to
Yes.
have a little background prior to attending.
And
the
they're all
first-
nonprofits, like sometimes we get people who are applying for grants or start, like, because they don't understand the grant process.
Yeah,
So,
Well, we do screen them a little bit.
We try
Like,
to,
If it's
yeah.
not an eligible request, we probably won't include it.
Yeah.
I mean,
Right.
the organization policy, it's very old.
yes,
So some of the questions have come up about like, should we screen for just like the sheer size of applications? And
Yeah.
we've never been given that direction. So I know that some council members have felt that when we received the grant application for $35,000 right away, it's like, well, no, we're not, the whole budget is like 20,000, we're not doing that.
yeah.
But I don't really have a direction of like, what's the max? That's not in the policy, so I think that they'll still be in there. But based on the budget, we can't recommend them because we're basically gonna say that the budget's capped at the prior year budget unless you guys say, well, that actually looks really worthy. We're gonna direct staff to increase the grant allocation. So that's the sort of council's level of weigh-in. So if you've
Okay.
looked at them, then you'll have a sense of, well, I really think we do need to increase the budget to be able to award this bigger one because it really is worthy. Because I wouldn't make that, I wouldn't go out on a limb like that, and we don't really have any reason to assume council would do that.
okay.
So that's what the only nuance to the staff giving recommendations.
Councilor Carver?
So I just recall the idea that we did seem to work within an envelope. And deliberately leaving enough cushion for late applications.
That's part of just the informal direction that I've had in the last couple of
Yeah.
years is to leave 10% of the total thing for future, like, requests that might come in.
Pop-ups.
So basically, we take the last year's amount, maybe we increase it slightly, but like, take the last year's amount, put that buffer in for things that come in late. and then look at what's left and say, okay, well, that's what we've got to work with, we'll give our recommendations. And then if council looks at it and says, well, we wanna increase the pot and therefore be able to support more, that's the decision you guys have to make in the
And we
process.
can give people less than what they ask.
Yep.
Oh,
Because a
absolutely.
lot of people shoot high. I know when they apply for grants, they shoot high and hope for the best.
It's very common on ours to have, like, every year the request
Not that
is
I've ever
2,000,
done
and every
that.
year we give it 1,000, and we rarely will say at the staff level to increase it.
Yeah.
If it's been 1,000 every year for the last 3 years, and then, like, unless there's a really solid justification for why they're requesting two,
Yeah,
so that's, yeah.
And that's useful information, actually, the prior year or two, because I think you've done that, Ashley, included that in recent.
Yeah, I've showed the prior year, what was requested, and then the current year list of
Yeah.
everything, and then what Dylan's recommendation is for the proposed allocation. So
Sometimes-
last year was $30,000 is what we had as a grant, and then we had $3,000 as for late. And we typically know what those requests are gonna be, because they're annual and they come from, you know, the Legion and stuff, so we leave a little cushion for things like that, or for new requests.
And that's another piece of information, actually, the amount of grant in our
Yes.
grant budget as a percentage of our total budget, compared to other municipalities, because while $30,000 may not seem like much, it's probably quite a lot for a small municipality, so.
yes, and plus, each councillor in some, like Model, each councillor has a pot of money that they have for their district, that they can.
Oh, each count, that's right, yeah.
We don't have that option, we don't have a discretionary fund,
Yeah.
not even the mayor. So, you know, although it is a common perception that we do not have that, so, and some councils do, especially ones that have districts, and, you know, we're at large members, right?
Right.
So,
Okay, so I think we can move to the last part, which is great, because we're near the end of our hour here anyway.
okay,
So this was just talking about the content, so you know, like last couple minutes. But really, you know, the discussion last night gave you the information about where the assessment role is going. You know, our usual approach in terms of the budget is we look at where all the expenditures that would have been necessary for the coming year would leave us relative to the expected revenues, and then if it's necessary to suggest any tax rate increases, we will. That hasn't really been the case generally. There's often a decision to be made about fire tax rate, because we do know and did discuss yesterday at audit that a portion of fire services costs are still being borne by the town, in addition to what is being spread over the larger fire service area. And we're really trying to get that to the point where everyone is paying the same, not the actual same charge, because residents of the town have hydrant charges, and that's obviously gonna be additional. But the fact that a portion of the debt service for the fire department is being covered by town taxpayers rather than shared with the larger fire service area. And the discussion was that we didn't want to jump that fire rate up really quickly. We would see the increases in assessment, et cetera. I do want to say that at the staff level, we would suggest another 0.5% increase on the fire rate. Last year, we talked about it going up 0.5% because we didn't want it to go up 1 cent all at once. But that being said, I think we really do need to get to the point where the fire rate is covering the full cost of the fire service. And with another large truck purchase coming this year, we do need to continue to have increases in the rate as opposed to just increases in the assessment base. So I'm putting that out there. Happy to get any feedback now. I think we reserve a few minutes for Kelly to talk about.
I was
Yeah.
looking right at him.
Well, thank you very much for that intro. Well, I mean, it's clear. I think our assessment on in total, if we add it all up, it's about 6%. It's gone up. Inflation rate is around 2%. So if we assume, which I do, that the general rate won't go up, that gives you a 6% increase in revenue, which is about, let's say, $250,000. Now, the numbers are different for the fire service, I understand that, but, and the jurisdiction is much larger. So my only question really is, if we said that yes, we want to transfer whatever remaining subsidy the town has to the fire department, whatever that amount is, I have no idea. Is there a way that we could have the fire department and the accounting people sharpen their pencil enough to get that done without increasing the fire rate? Because I think it's clear that, to me at least, that we don't want to increase the general rate. I would prefer if we could increase any rate this year.
Anybody?
Seems a reasonable ask.
Yeah.
We don't think
I think we would have to.
No.
No.
It's not
Discuss
been a
that
special meeting.
Adam as well.
Of course.
Yeah, I do know that they didn't spend their entire budget this year, so that's good in regards to, you know, maybe saving costs and that type of thing. That's certainly an option to look at, yeah.
I'm sorry, I might have missed it. I was just dealing with the logistics of the next meeting starting in 5 minutes. What was the specific thing we have to talk to you about?
To try, Kelly, did you, I don't want to speak on it.
No, go ahead.
Just to try to, instead of increasing the fire tax rate, see if we can reduce the expenses.
Just squeeze it into the existing.
Yeah. see
Yeah,
if
I
we
mean,
can
that'll obviously be the
balance it
attempt.
out.
I just wanna say that if we can't succeed at that attempt, then rather than having the town taxpayers continue to subsidize it, I think staff are recommending, I'll say are, not just would, that we continue to increase the fire rate if needed. But yeah, it would only be if we can't squeeze it in.
Yeah, I would put it in just to be clear. I mean, we have made this change and it was a smart change to make, but it's not gone unnoticed by people who pay attention to their tax bill. That we basically moved the key to a different walnut. And the taxes are still going up and just going up in a different area.
Yeah.
Well, it's true, except that every cent on the fire tax rate raises twice as much money as it does on the general rate because the larger area is paying that cost.
Yeah.
So town taxes actually go down more than the resulting increase in the fire rate.
I understand.
Yeah, it's like a 50%.
Most people, by the way, don't understand.
No, I know.
We soon have to wrap up because
Yeah.
our guests are
Can I
here.
have a quick question?
Yes.
So that idea of a half% increase on the fire rate, that would be across the board, town and county?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what, if necessary, that's what we would recommend.
We were already paying a bit more because of the town.
Yeah, the differential hydrant rate will always be differential. I mean, that's only fair.
So there's another piece of information for the public.
Mhm.
I don't know if people appreciate that we have the 2 millimeters code and clear land on our fire service. I don't know if people know that in the public.
Well, maybe that's a future
This is a
piece for the communication.
Noted.
Okay, we're drawing to an end. I guess we're here for our next meeting. Thank you for joining us on YouTube. If there have been people tuned in or will watch later, no, not for special meeting. So anyway, I will adjourn this meeting and we'll stretch our legs